And to the end of that series of impulses, the Spaniards cut a deal kind of with the Turks, saying they would withdraw from Rome if the Turks would take it. Like they would try to evade. That went through. The Turks ended up liberating Rome and Naples. Well, liberating Rome. Yeah, we took it from the Spanish and gave it to the Sultan. Okay. And it's not liberating because it's a French territory. French minor neutral. Over in Spain, the Spaniards built up a little bit, but they also attacked, trying to get to Milan, try to reverse some of those Austrian victories. Charles jumped in their way and stopped them. The Danes continued their lost wandering, making it into Munich and reflagging that, and they built some additional forces in Copenhagen. There's nothing better to do. They could go take Prague, but that doesn't help anyone. It only would make it more likely for Austria to take the territory. Right now the Russians own it, and it's going to be harder. So on this new round, excuse me, Soult marched in and chased Ferdinand back to Milan. Brief battle there, not too exciting. Ferdinand definitely took the loss. On the other hand, I believe it's Davout under here, marched from Paris, gathered Napoleon, and they combined for an attack into the Ardennes. And oh boy, did they get beaten. This is one of the cool things about the buckets of dice type approach, is that you can get these really, really extreme results. Something like 2 casualties on their side against a 5 and a 6, which is 1 real casualty and 1 soft one, and 5 or 6 casualties against the French. They had nothing left to reserve to play for that, and they're knocked back with almost nothing left defending Paris, and Prussia open, the way open for Prussia and Russia to move. Of course, here's the problem. Prussia has no cards. They just got a resource, so they're going to be able to do something, and they're going to convert that into some victory points, there's no question. Russia has a card, though, in terms of they still have their reserve left. So we're going to see what happens there, but I think Napoleon just may have lost the war entirely on his side. Now the question is, can anybody catch Austria at this point? As the game's winding down and it's becoming clear that what things are worth, the play becomes a little bit more furious. So the Prussians launched an attack into Picardy. Napoleon intercepted, and he managed to drive off Blucher's force, barely. He's got only himself left. And then we saw Brunswick move forward. As far as Brussels, had Napoleon intercepted there and lost, he would have lost both Brussels and Picardy. So he chose to let the Prussians make their choice, and they flagged Brussels. They had to spend a resource point that they got off that route in order to do this, and it ended up on net even. The resource point would be worth a victory point. They only got 1 thing. They could have gotten 2, maybe more, if they had gotten a good draw, but they got a decent draw. It's just they didn't get the success they wanted. Speaking of fast movements, Blake came marching up to try to threaten Venice. Now, Charles had a pretty good chance of intercepting him and did. But what's exciting here is this was a really dumb move by the Spaniards, it turns out. They ended up giving Austria not only a flag overrun and a rout and all that, but Austria rolled a 1 on the die roll and ended up getting a bonus resource out of it, which is a victory point that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. The chances of them taking Venice were probably much less than the chances of this happening. A mix of occurrences here. Soult got turned back by Charles. No big shock there, Charles outnumbers him. But Napoleon, well, first thing is, the unit in Limoges attacked in Orleans. Mutual elimination, stays Russian held. But Napoleon attacked, I believe it was Bagration who was there. Yeah, I think so. And just Napoleon alone versus, I think, like 3 units in Bagration. And he totally wiped him out. Flag overrun. Didn't get a resource out of it, but then spent an additional point to convert Orleans. So France is looking a lot better on the chart if we look. Still not in the lead. If we look, Russia's got +3. Austria's at +2. France is at 1, 2, 3, 4, -2. Which isn't too good there. Turkey's not doing bad. So yeah, we're looking at still a Russian lead. Maybe Austria has a shot. Austria's still got a card. They should be able to get a victory point off of that, I would hope. I don't think anybody else has a real shot. So the British went, and they were the person or the people with the most cards sitting in their hand. They had 2 in their hand, no resources. They moved Beresford navally to invade Antwerp and took that, flagged it. They'll be able to build troops there and maybe grab, depending on what their card is, say Picardy and Paris, who knows. Seemed like their best option. I forgot to roll my siege for Ciudad Rodrigo. Got to do that. But then the Austrians played nationalist uprisings. And they got Prague back from the Russians that way. But they also boned the English by having Christiana, which is where Beresford came from, revolt and go back to the Danes. So here we are in what should be the final turn of the Napoleonic Wars. There's a slight possibility the Napoleon abdicates card could stretch it to another turn. Dealt out the cards, played the first French turn, and the Russians are realizing they made a bad choice. So the French made an attack. Davout tried to hit Schwarzburg. He was actually defeated, even though he outnumbers him and all kind of other good stuff. And then spent the other point moving down into Lublin and grabbing Krakow. Austria is France's main opponent at this point. Austria is well in the lead. Russia, looking at what they had to gain, thought that there would be enough here in terms of French keys that they could grab a hold of. But those are keys that are owned by allies of theirs. They have to return them to their allies. None of them were formalized in peace treaties. This thing was, but so they can't grab a lot of that stuff. So they're not going to get a big swing on Austria that way. And now they're looking at, well, should have just joined the pro-French camp and schwacked into Austria real hard. So after a full round, the English used their Admiralty card, picked up an extra card. Let's look at what happened throughout the world. The Austrians moved John, who they foolishly had set up in the wrong place. They had him set up over near Munich. They moved him back to try to cope with the Poles. The Russians laid siege to Grodno and positioned the Russian Navy for a possible invasion of Denmark. The Prussians engaged the Danes and were defeated, driven back. The Turks made their landing. The Spaniards, Costanos, that master of warfare, once again defeated Wellington, grabbing Granada back. And that's not that valuable, because these are now Spanish keys rather than French ones, but if Spain collapses, that's worth a victory point. France loses a point. So even if they're not worried about England, at the very least, keeping Spain alive is worth something. Let's see what else. And the Danes used their special ability to draw more cards. Alright, Davout managed to move down and defeat Schwarzburg. Hasn't reflagged the area yet. The English moved into Christiana, and they also did not spend on the flagging. They spent on upping the Swedish value diplomatically. The reason there is that's worth a victory point if they can get them into their camp. And finally, the Austrians under John, actually I haven't even finished their turn, they still have an action, marched into Lublin, defeated the Poles there, and got a flag overrun, which is basically a situation where they eliminated the entire opposition. Therefore, the flag would change as if a flagging event had been paid for. So they got kind of a free bonus point there that they weren't counting on. And the French are kind of reeling here. First, the Russians they succeeded in their siege at Grodno. They made a landing up here, Mecklenburg. The Prussians sent someone over to finish Warsaw off, so now that whole Polish experiment is done. And I think for good, because I think that's an event card only. Blucher marched forward to meet Napoleon in the Ardennes, and Napoleon decided to stand and fight. He was defeated barely. It was approximately equal losses. He's back in Picardy, but as those forces get smaller, it's going to become easier for the Prussians to actually move their force. All right. And ending that round, we saw the Turks move up to Naples. They didn't flag it yet, but they used their Janissaries, which give them a battle advantage if they use that as their command point, if they roll for them. And they got a really low roll and didn't manage to press against the Spanish troops, and the Spanish didn't intercept. We saw Costanos try his luck against Wellington again, and this time it didn't work out too well. He was defeated and pushed back. And we see the Danes carving out some space. They got down to Nassau and unflagged it so that it's now a French territory again. Blucher tried to assign some troops to intercept them, but that didn't work. And the problem here is he really does need to defeat Napoleon. If he wants to get the victory, and this is the last turn, he's got to get to these rich areas right near Paris. But he also has to hold on to the territories he has. And it looks to me as though Brunswick can move forward and maybe take Hanover back. But still, you kind of don't want to have to expend too much chasing these Danes down. So we've seen a little bit of interesting action going on. The French grabbed most of the keys in France, try to catch up with the Austrians. The British shipped Hill down into Lisbon. The Austrians marched Charles down to face Blake. The intention there, grab Rome as quickly as possible. He was beaten off by the Spaniards. They've been really pretty decent in battle this game. And then we went to the Russians, who marched through Hanover and Munster and beat up the Danes and grabbed control of Nassau. Well, that massive Prussian army moved in to Brussels. Napoleon intercepted. The Prussians had a fairly strong advantage in dice, but after the roll-off, it was tied, and then Napoleon committed the guard, and ended up actually routing Blucher's forces from the difference that the guard provided. I think certainly at least 3 of the dice were effective, maybe all 4 were. Blucher ended up routing, losing 9 strength points. Napoleon actually lost 5, I believe, down losing leaders, etc. So his force is getting small. If he hadn't committed the guard, he would have lost everything, including himself. He needed the recuperation value of at least 1 die. And then the Prussians also moved up and took Hanover after that, but things don't look great for them. Not that they ever have, but... Alright, well, the English conquered a great deal of France, and they took Ciudad Rodrigo as well. They may well be winning the game at this point, but there's one problem. And that's that before victory determination, we have to deal with the peace phase. And if France surrenders, there's a good chance England will not get as much off of them, even though they'll be getting Gibraltar back, as they'll be giving back. So right now they're actually in a stronger victory point position. If they hadn't claimed Paris, maybe they could have claimed Marseille instead, and they probably would be winning then. But, oh well. So when we calculate everything out, the English did win the game. They're a good 1, 2, 3, 4 points ahead of their baseline, whereas the Austrians are 3, including resources, and the Russians are only 2. Just trying to, Spain and Denmark don't immediately surrender. They probably really would, but they don't immediately change their situation until the war is finished with them, and that's not going to happen because it's the last turn of the game. Denmark did have to leave Munich, and they repatriated. But the basic changes to the map of Europe right now, other than the Spanish War, which is still underway, is Turkey has Rome. The English gained a little bit of territory in Urbino. The Austrians definitely gained some powerful hold in North Italy. The Russians got a couple key provinces in Germany, and the Prussians definitely extended their holdings in both Belgium and in Switzerland. The big English gain was Bray, as well as Antwerp. And that's really about it. They got Ireland back, which is cool. But, not a huge restructuring after this war. So I guess I'll come back with a discussion of the game as a whole in a bit.